Hey, my name's Alex Wise and today I'm going to demonstrate how I post-process two images that I took at Phillip Island. Normally I don't post these kind of videos, more so because my post-processing is pretty boring and I normally just do curves, saturation, that kind of run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. But this time I went a bit above and beyond and took two images because I couldn't get the desired result in camera. By this I mean I was trying to balance the star trails with the still wool and it just wasn't happening. So I took one of the stars in a separate exposure and then another of the still wool with the intention of going home and combining them in Photoshop. The final outcome's not too bad, and I must admit I'm no expert in Photoshop, so feel free to just chime in and say no Alex, you should be doing it this way. But yeah, look, I'll walk you through how I did it, and if you have any feedback feel free to chime in. Cheers.
So let's get started. Last time I made a tutorial video, a lot of people complained saying my voice was too quiet. I've got a new mic this time, so hopefully it's a bit louder. If not, turn up your hearing aid because there's not much more I can do. Anyway, so this is the final image. As you can see, it's very pink looking, and I've sort of tried to blend it so the person is almost on the horizon, which is pretty accurate for the scene actually when we shot it. So I'll show you what images we're working with. This is the still wool, and this is the sky. So yeah, pretty different to the final image, as you can see. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to edit the still wool first. Basically with this one, we'll be making it pink by using the tints and the split toning. So first off, I'm going to bump up the tint pretty high. Just a little bit about that. And I'm going to use the highlights of split toning and go for something pretty purple. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty much how I want it. Now I'm going to go back and just adjust the saturation and the vibrance of the shot a bit. So I'll just bump up the vibrance first and slowly experiment with the saturation, decreasing it a little. Okay. Now what I want to do is crop it a bit, because the reason I want to do this is because there's so much black space around the image that's just wasted, so I don't really need this, and it'll just be a bit of a pain when I go to blend it in with this star shot. So what I'm going to do is use the crop overlay tool and just crop around it. Here I'm aiming to center it. Look, I've got to be honest, as I'm doing this, I can't actually remember how I processed it exactly, which just oozes confidence, I know, but look, that's how Photoshop sometimes is, just a bit of experimentation and you'll get there eventually. So I'm pretty happy with how that's looking now. Another thing I'm going to do is use the adjustment brush to paint over this still wool itself. I just want to bring down the highlights a bit because they're almost blowing out a little bit. Oops, that's up. So I'm just laying, oh, ever so faintly. Cool. And another thing I want to do is that this area around the shot, this bit here and this bit here, basically what this is that when I was shooting, my lens fogged up, and it wasn't until the end of the shoot that I actually realized that it was fogged up. And I got home and I sort of thought to myself, oh, that was such a waste of time, I'm not going to get any good shots. But I actually got home and it created an interesting effect that I've actually used to my advantage in this shot. It sort of looks like I've done some dodging and burning around the frame, but it's actually just the fog, and we're going to use it to our advantage by just bumping it up a little bit. And I'm just going to bump up the contrast and the saturation slightly. Alright, cool. So now it's time to play with the stars. As you can see, the final image and the actual image are quite different. First I'll start off by straightening the horizon by using the crop overlay and just drawing up. Cool, so that's straightened it. And next I want to do is burn the bottom part of the image for two reasons really. Is that I think it'll make blending in the still wool a lot easier, and also because that area in particular is actually really noisy, so I don't overly want it in my final shot. So I'm just going to pull back the exposure a little bit and get the brush and just paint over. Much better. Okay, so for this one I use curves quite a bit actually by pumping up the lights and the highlights. Basically all I'm doing here is to try to bring out the stars a bit more and increase the impact. Perfect. Actually, I might just quickly go back to the still wall photo and just do the same with the curves a little. Much better. Okay, once again, I'm going to adjust the tint quite heavily. So go to your tint and increase it, probably to around 80ish, I reckon. Cool. And next I'm going to adjust my hues and saturation. So I go to this pane and get the dropper and just select any part of the sky and slowly pull it back down a bit. Great. Basically what I'm aiming for here is I still want to retain a bit of blueness of the sky. I don't know if blueness is actually a word, but anyway. But sort of mixing it up a bit so you have a bit of blue in the sky, but there's also that pink element too. So I'm pretty happy with it now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to export both images and open them up in Photoshop, and we'll get started. I guess a bit of a backstory for how the image was actually taken. It's my friend Rick, he's standing underneath an umbrella while someone else is standing above him waving still wool around in the air. It came out pretty cool, but it wasn't exactly how we were planning for it to look. The poor guy who was actually using the still wool didn't have the right gear on at the time and actually ended up with all these holes in his jumper from the sparks of the still wool. Not good, not good. But anyway, so I'll open up these two images into Photoshop. Okay, so I'm going to use this as my base image of the stars, and I'll grab this one by holding Control and pressing A to select all, and then hold Control and press C to copy it, and then go back over to your stars and then paste it in by pressing Control, or holding Control, sorry, and pressing V. Okay, so there you have it. I'm just going to close off the other layer. So at this point really what I'm going to do is use the free transform tool and just really move it around until I manage to get it in a position where it sort of seamlessly blends in. At this stage, it can be a bit difficult to line it up perfectly, so it might not reflect how my actual final image looked, but I'll try to do my best for the tutorial's purpose. Okay, I'm just going to use that as a bit of a guide for the moment and create a layer mask. So basically what a layer mask is that I've got two layers and I can paint over parts of the image to bring back the original layer underneath it. I do this by selecting the paintbrush tool and making sure that it's on black. So when I say that I can bring back parts of the layer underneath it, I'm painting over the area and this is the effect it'll give. So it's pretty neat and I use it all the time. So I'm just painting over. I might just change the size of my brush just for this part where it is a little not blending as well. I'll lower the opacity too. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that now. And look, that's pretty much the gist of it. But I'm just going to go a little bit further and show you what other techniques I used when I was processing this image. Something that I've become really fond of lately, and I probably shouldn't include it in this because it is a paid product, but it's Color Effects Pro by Nixoft. It has this feature called Pro Contrast, and I reckon it's just fantastic to use. I'm just firing it up now, and I'll give you an indication of how it sort of works. So generally I'll use the strong contrast feature of it, but really it's just more experimentation and adjusting to suit your image. So look, this is overkill for the moment, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'll hit OK. And now lower the opacity a lot and just gradually bring it up to a level that I'm happy with. Okay, great. My final touches for the image is really probably just doing some burning around the sea, because it's a little bit noisy and distracting to the image itself. So what I'll do, I'm just using the burn tool and just going to paint around this part of the image, just to sort of put the emphasis more on the middle of the shot as opposed to the grain that is surrounding the image. And look, really, that's all there is to it. As I said, I'm no expert on this, and I appreciate any feedback that you guys might have in terms of better ways to approach it. And look, be honest, if it doesn't look that great and could be blended better, I'm more than open to hearing. Anyway, I hope this was of use for you, and if you have any feedback, feel free to drop a line and I'd be happy to help. Thanks very much.